Alright everybody, welcome back to the Chupacabra's Lair. I am of course Larry the Chupacabra, and today we're taking a look at a cool game that I've been meaning to record and take a look at for quite a while, and I tried a few different formats for this concept review, but I think we'll just go for a from the hip, just sort of walking you through how it plays for the moment. So Riftwalker Tower Defense is a cool little tower defense game. It feels a lot like Warhammer 4K, and it's got all the monikers of a good tower defense game. I, of course, am a big fan of tower defense games, and this as a concept review, there's not a lot to look at. We're basically taking a look at core mechanics and the start of a lot of the more expansive features like storylines and things like that. So let's just take a quick look at what we've got here. So we've got an equipments area and a level selection area. We've got 4 different levels to play currently. So we'll just jump into level 1 and see what we've got going. So right when you jump in here, you've got, these monikers of your standard tower defense game. You've got different types of towers. You've got fire towers, you've got freezing cold slowing towers, and then you've got poison towers. And so as you might well imagine, fire towers are your primary damage dealer when it comes to Murglin stuff. And you want to make sure you intersperse these in a healthy manner so that they can get the most bang for your buck, let's just call it. Yeah. The interface is pretty good. What I would look for in this right now is maybe some tool tips, because when you click on these, you don't necessarily know how much they cost unless you click on them. It's just the problem becomes when you don't have enough money to buy something, you can't click on it to see how much you have to save up for. All it does is tell you that you can't buy it yet. So as you can kind of see, there's like these little Warhammery dudes, some pretty decent models. They just run through and attempt to assault your base. Their path is right here, this little line to get back in over here. And they drop different items periodically. So this is to go back into that inventory I showed before jumping in here briefly, just to announce that it exists. And these allow you to equip for different tower varieties, different perks that, increase their damage or attack speed. For the most part, you would sell them and maybe trade them into a market later, which is kind of cool. But for the most part, you get a bunch of them, and they're not necessarily all useful. And you can always upgrade towers in between matches, like you would expect in a tower defense game, which I like. I wouldn't mind it if these interfaces were a little less blocky and maybe attached to a side panel here. A lot of these buttons are rather large. It kind of feels like it wants to go on to an Android game or something, but it's hard to say. So we're just upgrading our towers right now as we start jumping into further and further waves. Eventually I'll start building some of these fancier towers. This is a giant AoE tower, shoots kind of slow. This is a sort of short-range AoE poison tower. And this is like a big nasty blue ice freezing tower. So there is a sort of useful delineation between the different types of towers so far. Obviously, your most bang for your buck when it comes to dealing damage are going to come from your red guns. However, you do run into a couple of different items that will make it harder to kill enemies. Besides, of course, having flying enemies later, in that I feel that Poison Tower's intent is to be a little bit more destructive against armor, or units with a lot of armor or shields. These are units that have, big gray bars that represent like a giant plate of armor. And then I feel like blue towers, other than just keeping stuff slow, do a pretty decent job of nailing shields off. And of course, these green towers are poison towers, they do damage over time. So even if something runs off past here with a little bit of health left, this should, in theory, make sure it stays dead. We'll just upgrade the rest of our red towers a little bit to make sure they're nice and beefy. So right now we've got this sort of elemental trifecta going. We've got damage, slowing, poison towers. The one thing I might look for is like a gray or sort of like off blue colored tower that would offer me the ability to specifically target air towers, because currently one of the problems that I've run into in this game is it's not really apparent why, when, or where the air units will come in. And you'll see that in a little bit later as we get further into the game, that they just sort of roam around and just kind of do whatever. And it's often not clear where they're supposed to fly, or what they're supposed to do, or how you're supposed to combat them. So some indication of where the flying units come in later would be great. And so now we're starting to see not only the faster type units, but now we're starting to get in some of the meteor units. And you start to see the poison tower sort of come into its own with these units that are slightly sneaking past a little bit. To deal with them, there's not a whole lot of things to do besides just building more juicier towers. Along with this big sucker to kind of keep them slowed a little bit extra. This is just a laser satellite that continuously fires on enemies to keep them slowed. It's called the Cure-All, not certain why. But now that we're starting to get into meteor units, they've got a little bit more health. You gotta keep them slowed for longer. And it helps that when two of these red towers get together and start shooting at enemies, they do a miniature fire supernova, which is really handy. And I believe that's an item I unlocked when I was first playing through, when the prototype / alpha became available. And this tower is really nice because it just lobs balls of fire at things. The next tower I'm going to check out is this one here. The Emperor, or whatever. This one here. It lobs gigantic nuclear bombs and poison. So right now, if you kind of look in here close, these minions are the ones that I was talking about before, and they've got this nasty sort of shield on them. And the poison and the ice do a much better job of kind of keeping them under control, because straight fire doesn't put a whole lot of a dent in those shields or the armor. And the armor is something you'll see once we start getting into things like tanks. So I'll just... It's kind of hard to put these up here, as I'm sure you can see I'm having a little bit of difficulty. This turret you can kind of put wherever, because as you saw, it encompasses the entire map and will snoop nuke just about everything. So we can check that out. I do like that these units have a great variation. You've got more than just Warhammer guys, they've got tanks, as you can see. That nuclear silo is just lobbing missiles in here. And this one, it's very slow firing, so you've really got to keep stuff under control. And then the next one I'll pull out is this AoE lob machine, which shoots out a low damage AoE that pretty much hits everything on the map. It's kind of useful, kind of not. Some of these more expensive towers, this is actually like the tier 3 tower for the fire damage. This is the tier 3 tower for the ice slowing, and this is the tier 3 tower for the poison. Their uses are not always super obvious. And here you start to see the air units coming in like I was talking about. And I would not... There's no real way for me to understand or know why they chose the path that they've chosen. There's no, like, wispy lines in the air, like a wind pattern that would indicate to me why they're flying there or not. And there's also no tower that specifically can just target just them. So having a delineation in in that sort of sense on how to like assign towers to attack specific units would be nice, because as you saw, like towers just kind of attack whatever's near them, and that can kind of destroy your strategy of handling stuff in here when these guys and even this guy just start shooting air units for no apparent reason other than they just kind of showed up, and that can make things just a little bit fiddly, not to mention difficult. Let's see, I want to upgrade. No, don't. I don't want another one of those towers. Here, let me upgrade you, because you're going to be more important. I do like that each towers kind of have their own 3D modeling, too. That's very cool and very Warhammery. Oh, and here's the boss level. I didn't notice we were wave 10 of 10. Bosses are another kind of iffy thing. They have a lot of meaty health. And unless you just slow the crud out of them like I did, and I've played a lot of this, they tend to just outrun your units, and you end up just getting some lives lost at the end, but they don't necessarily punish you overly much. So going into those items, I do like some sort of customization in a game like this, because without having like upgrade trees inside the game itself, like miniature talent trees for different types of damage, like maybe you want to specialize in damage over time or fire damage or poison damage, but in lieu of that you can kind of click on this and you can equip stuff in these different slots. Let's see here. This is where dragging and dropping would be rather useful. And so you can kind of just decide what weapons you want. Let's see here. And these have different goals. I'm not sure what the red text minus the green text is supposed to entail. But usually in a game like this, green is good, so I'm guessing the red means that it's a detriment and doesn't offer a whole lot to the unit. What else we got? Extra speed, but less damage. Not totally useful. And each item, tower has its own different thing that it's got. It's got different items that can be equipped. But most of these are just a detriment to the unit, so there's not a super lot of use. Currently, most of these are just stats. Like I was talking about when I was playing in that first map, this is that the Fire Blast level 1. You get a couple fire towers together shooting, and then they'll suddenly explode and do extra damage, which is kind of cool. Gives you more like on-hit functionality and utility to kind of build out your personal strategy and your kit of like what stuff does what and why and when, which is kind of nice. That's something that I've always enjoyed in tower defense games, like orcs must die, but you don't always necessarily get. And like I was saying with talents, it might be interesting to later down the road see them flesh it out so that as you get along you can kind of do like a pilot career talent tree, so to speak, that would then allow you to specialize in like poison damage or fire damage or cold damage. Or I'm kind of pushing for this because in a game with air units you really need something that can just pack a wallop for anti-air, maybe an air tower that specializes in wiping out large numbers of air units. But for right now, I mean, you can kind of equip different stats in the items panel. Give yourself extra damage, extra casting speed, which can be important, especially for slower towers like this IBS tower that is like the slowest nuke on the planet. It can be a lot more helpful if it shoots faster, but for the most part, those are pretty basic. Oh, looks like they reset my levels when I played that. Not a problem. We just start jumping in here. This is one of those. So here we have a map. It's a molten planet. It'd be kind of cool to see like little critters flying around in the background later, after they're done sort of finalizing some of how the combat works. So they're going to come through here on this side, and they're going to loop around twice. Well, like 1.5. So once and then another half and go out the door. So we want to kill them before they can do that. We want to make them real good and dead. And they're, of course, super freaking fast. But as you can see, when enough of these towers shoot together, they do this little AoE because I unlocked that Fire Blast ability. And of course, there's not really a point in selling yet. It'll be interesting to see what they do at the store. We'll just go ahead and upgrade some stuff. I'm always a fan in games when they kind of encourage you to do more upgrading than you do just buying a crap load of towers. There's more strategy to that. You have to be careful with your money. Do I buy that extra tower, or is it more valuable if I just super buff, you know, one of my existing towers? So far, I think you can get away with a little bit of both until the very, very end of most levels, which is good. I mean, it's not always the best scheme to lock people in real early. Makes the game a little bit less approachable for people who aren't used to tower defense games. Oh, these tanks are fast. I wouldn't also mind like an exclusively utilitarian towers that don't really do damage. I shared this game prototype with a friend of mine whose gamer tag is Navanax, and he said that he was able to pretty much get through every single level by building nothing but ice towers, which could be a tactic all on its own, but you would need to sort of delineate that some of those ice towers would have to be like only slowing, which that might be the case. I don't necessarily know why a tower does what it does. What do we got? Freeze. Yeah, these do damage. These all do damage. So yeah, you can definitely get away with that, it looks like. It's sometimes hard to get a full handle this early on in a game for what you feel like the developers are going to be working on, just because this game is very much in alpha stages yet, so all this game mechanics, even like the core storyline of the game itself, could change at just about any moment. So as we kind of go along in this level, I just felt like I'd talk a little bit about story modes in tower defense games, and what would really sort of drive this game as more than just one more sort of clone of the initial standard traditional tower defense games that you've seen for years. Like that balloon game with the monkeys and the ninjas that came out in the 90s, that's sort of been around for a real long time. So when you look at the trailer for this game, you are the Riftwalker, and you have to defend against these crazy armies and minions coming through the void to murgle everybody. And so, to me, that implies that there's going to be some sort of story-driven campaign mode, which is great. I mean, people love story. I love a background as to like what happened, what caused the rift to get spawned. And this is what I mean by dealing with flying units. Is unless you know that these flying units are going to come, like, why would I immediately assume they will just go straight for the ending, when in the first level they just zipped around all over hell and creation? But it'll be interesting to see where the story goes and how your role ties into that. Maybe there's a background behind the creation of these weapons to defend against monsters coming out of the rift. Resources. That's fun. Another component that I think would be really cool to see moving forward with this is the ability to have units, not on your team, but enemy units, that you have to watch out for, and you have to build specific towers to defend against that can you know, deal damage to your towers, temporarily incapacitate your towers. Maybe do like a transdermal switcheroo where like a teleporter opens up a rift and they get swapped. So that kind of messes with your strategy that you've got to defend against incoming invaders. So that would be something that you'd maybe have to do a preview of what sort of enemies are going to come kill you, like you would see in the games like Orcs Must Die. Something harder to do, but it might be interesting to see. Which would, again, bring it sort of out of the mesh of an old-school tower defense game that we've seen a lot over the years. And there's you know, I'm sure they have some intentions to expand upon this, because these are great core mechanics of a tower defense. Important things to have. Very critical to make a tower defense game. But you really have to break out of that shell of the traditional and the generic tower defense if you want to be more than just zombie tower defense game number XYZ on the Android platform, and I've seen a lot of those. But so far, it's pretty good. And here we've got the boss wave. I'll throw in some more slowing towers. Another AoE tower. This boss may get through. I've lost a lot of lives to planes so far. It'd be interesting to see the bosses do something cooler too, because right now they're just a really scaled up version of the armor fighter laser dudes. Like maybe they can annihilate towers if you're not careful. Maybe they spawn other minions that screw stuff up or do some extra added utility. Yeah, he's gonna get through. So you really gotta plan ahead for the end boss once you get a feel for what they do. The next thing I wanted to show was they actually do have a broader selection of units than just, you know, crazy Warhammer space mech guys, which is good. I always... variety is important. It is, as many people like to put, the spice of life. So these units are going to come up along... Let me just close this. They're going to come up along this path and come along these crazy alien mushroom Mayan ruins to try and make us dead, which I don't think we want. Because I don't know about you, but I like it when my insides remain on the inside. Oh, what are these? They're like crazy little insect dinosaurs. They're kind of cool. Let's put another tower here. So these are kind of hard to keep control of because now we're starting to see like a delineation of terrain, which makes it much harder to keep these guys slowed and bottlenecked and kill because, you know, I can't put any towers here, I can't put any towers here, so I've got to be really careful about maximizing the effectiveness of the towers that I can put in and really buffing the ones that I've got, or else I'm gonna get screwed pretty quick. So we've got these little salamander fly creatures that look kind of cool. Gotta put another slowing tower over here. So this provides a more of a challenge for someone who is like a big fan of tower defense games. You've really got to be careful about how you stick stuff, or else everything's going to get murdered. Another funny thing that we found when we were doing initial plays of this game to try and test it out and see what it's got going for it, my friend Neff found that you can actually get a nuclear item in like the first stage, and when you equip it, like every gunfire of like the little fire turrets is like a super nuke. So that's kind of funny. And these guys are getting through. I'm not sure how big of a company Burst 2 Flames are, but I think they've got the makings of something cool here. So that's all I'm really going to check out for right now. I really like the concept for this game, and I'm looking forward to seeing where it goes. I have, of course, been Larry the Chupacabra. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you've got a comment or a question, you know, maybe throw it out there. Maybe the developers will answer your question in the comments. And I'll see about maybe doing an interview with them later to see where they're going with the game. As always, I'm Larry the Chupacabra, and toodaloo!